Hi, welcome back to C1 Risk Training. Today we're talking about policy mapping, and we're going to show you how to map either your internal controls or your regulations and standards to your policies. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to show you the basic process for mapping those controls to policies. That's a relatively simple process, but we just wanted to start at the top here by talking a little bit about the value add of connecting those, both your internal controls and or regulations and standards to policies. So from an internal control perspective, of course, the real advantage is that in the C1 Risk platform, you can actually map your internal controls to control requirements, so to those requirements and standards, as well as your policies. And when you map those internal controls to your policies, then what you're going to see is the regulation or standard that the internal control is mapped to will also automatically pull in and connect to the policy. So from that perspective, you can see where your policies or how your policies interact with multiple regulations and standards. So if you're doing compliance against multiple regulations, again, having that consolidated internal control is and having that connected to your policy is going to help you understand whether your policies are compliant with that single or multiple standards or regulations. Now, secondly, from that control library perspective, then what we call our GRC or control library, the place where we keep our regulations and standards in the C1 Risk platform. If you're doing an audit of a specific regulation or standard, so if you're doing SOC 2 certification or ISO certification, obviously one of the things you want to do is look at how those control requirements connect to your policies. And again, make sure that your policies are in compliance with those regulatory, whether they're regulations or standards requirements that you need to meet the compliance requirement. So lots of requirements there. So again, once you've mapped those regulations or standards to your policy, one of the things that you can then do in the C1 Risk platform is you can do a gap analysis to see where your policies are meeting control requirements and where there are any gaps. And then again, based upon the scope of your audit, you know whether you've got to either create a policy exception and add to your policy or decide that you're in good enough shape and you're within the scope of your actual audit. So those are a couple of different reasons for actually going through this process. It's a very, very valuable process. It's very easy to execute in the C1 Risk platform. So now let's get into the platform and show you how we do it. Okay, so we're actually going to do this from the policy itself today. So I'm in the platform, I'm in the policy module, and I'm going to go and open my access control policy that I'm working on right now. We want to do this while the policy is in edit mode. So this is before we actually publish the policy. So while the status is active, we can execute this. So, and then here's what we're going to do. Quite simply, you see we have in the policy itself. So this is our access control policy. We've got an internal controls tab, and we also have a control libraries tab. And then actually in the details section as well, you can see that if I actually open the edit function here, that we have a control library section here with a lookup too. All right, but we're going to start with internal controls. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our internal controls tab, and then we're just going to go to our activity buttons and do lookup. And here we can see all of our internal controls from our compliance module here. And now we can start to look up. So we can do a couple of other things. We can do a couple of different things. So let's say we're doing ISO audit. We know access is section 9 of ISO. I can look up my ISO controls here, and you see I've got all of them here. And these are all access control internal controls. So what I'm going to do is I can select all of them, or I can just select the ones that I want. And now what I can do simply is I just click apply. And that's going to map all of these controls to that policy. And note here then, if you remember before when I clicked on this control library tab, it was blank. But now that I've added those internal controls, it's also pulled over all of the control requirements from ISO. And if there are any crosswalks, it would, or separate mappings to these internal controls from other standards, it would put all of those standards in as well. So that's a really quick way of killing two birds with one stone, so to speak, and mapping your internal controls and getting your control libraries automatically added. Similarly, though, if we want to map a control library separately, one of the things that we can do is then we're going to come back to the Details tab here, go back to Activity buttons and open this. And now we can do a lookup for the control library itself here. And again, maybe we just want to search Access and see what we've got and see what we're working with. And now we can start to add anything additional that we want to see here. That is related to our access control policy that's in scope for that access control. And again, if we don't see what we're looking for, we can be more detailed, or we can, so here we put in access control. So we can grab anything that we want here. And if we see something, and note we've already, from the previous page, we'd already selected a couple, it just adds up so you don't lose anything here. So maybe I can even try access review. There's lots of different ways that we can search. So, and here we got a few more that we can start to add here, so on and so forth, right? Okay, and so once we've done that, we just click apply. And similarly, now you've got your control library here. And I'm going to go ahead and click save. And now if I go back to that control libraries tab, you can see that I've got these controls connected here, okay? So then last thing, we want to show you how you can actually see this as well. So if we then go to an internal control, and I'll also go to the control library as well. What we can see if we open up one of our internal controls, so let's search A09 again. And we go into, let's go into a couple of these, make sure we can see it. You should be able to see your policy. Here it is. There's my access control policy connected here. And similarly, if I go into let's go to the control library. Let's just go into ISO again too. Again, we'll search A09. Now again, we can see in the control library that access control policy is connected to this control as well. So that gives you that holistic view all around. So you can, from your control library, you know which controls are connected from your internal control, or which policies are connected from your internal controls. You also know which policies are connected, and similarly from your policies. And of course, we can put all this on a dashboard for you, so you can look at this from a summary perspective, and of course do your gap analysis and see where you have gaps in your policies. And or controls that are missing from your policies. All right, so that concludes our training for today. Thank you very much.